take it seriously or take it for fun, but take in the Des Moines Arts Center.
Time Capsule, 5:30 Sundays on TV8.
Welcome to Face the Nation. I'm Lesley Stahl. The Kremlin is releasing political dissidents from Soviet jails. At the same time, peaceful demonstrators in Moscow are being flogged and kicked by plainclothesmen. Soviet leader Gorbachev's new policy of openness appears to be here one minute, gone the next.
We are looking into softening the law so that fewer people are behind bars and behind barbed wire.
Sergei Grigoryan and 140 other Russian dissidents were released from Soviet jails this week after pledging not to resume their political activities. And there were more signs of openness. Boris Pasternak's novel, Dr. Zhivago, will be published in the Soviet Union for the first time. And Gorbachev called for a more honest approach to Soviet history, including a reevaluation of the rule of Joseph Stalin. Now you see openness, now you don't. When foreign reporters try to cover a demonstration this week in Moscow, plainclothesmen brutally attack the protesters, as correspondent Wyatt Andrews reported on the CBS Evening News.
The worst of the violence was suffered by Jewish refusenik Natasha Beckman, who was thrown to the ground and kicked part of the time in full view of the uniformed militia, who took no action to stop the violence. As in previous days, much of the organized harassment was directed at Western reporters. The violence is subtle, usually kicks to the legs and punches to the kidneys.
The mixed signals continue. Andrei Sakharov gave what was described as a fearless speech to a group of visiting Americans in which he criticized human rights policies in his own country. Gorbachev seemed to be winning the global public relations war. As he was releasing dissidents this week, the news in Washington was that President Reagan was leaning toward a new interpretation of the ABM treaty that would allow the U.S. to go forward with SDI, or the Star Wars program. How genuine is Gorbachev's campaign of democratization? We'll ask Georgi Arbatov, member of the Soviet Central Committee, and in the U.S., Democrat Dante Fascell, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and Republican Richard Lugar of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Russia's new openness. How will it affect U.S.-Soviet relations? An issue facing the nation.
From CBS News, Washington, Face the Nation, with CBS News National Affairs correspondent Lesley Stahl. This portion of Face the Nation is sponsored by the financial professionals at Payne Weber.
Investing these days is a little like you playing tennis against Jimmy Connors. You're going to need all the professional help you can get. Payne Weber's capital management team is ready to provide that help right now. Because whether you run a company or invest in one, Payne Weber believes the quality of life just might depend on the quality of your financial services.
Hey, great match. Thanks, Jimmy. Thank you, Payne Weber. Next time I want those guys on my team, okay?
The Marines asked for a fighter to be based right at the front, so McDonnell Douglas built the AV-8B. Hospitals asked for a way out of the paper blizzard, so we build the information systems now used in 1 out of 5 U.S. hospitals. Airlines want to save fuel, so we're testing aircraft with new kinds of jet engines to cut fuel consumption over 40%. We are creating breakthroughs in aviation, space, and information systems. We're McDonnell Douglas.
Joining us now from Moscow, CBS News Moscow correspondent Wyatt Andrews. Wyatt, could you try to put some context into what has been happening in the Soviet Union? In the past week, the Kremlin releases 140 dissidents. In the same week, they send plainclothesmen in to brutally put down what appeared to be a peaceful demonstration. You were at that demonstration. How do you explain, in your own mind, the conflicting signals?
Leslie, there really is no way to explain it simply because the process that the Soviets are seeing their country undergoing now is not a simple one. In fact, after the 2 reports we put on the evening news this week detailing how the plainclothesmen seem to have some sort of authorization, we were even chided by some of the Jewish intellectual community here for not pointing out that what this evidence, that is the dissidents being released in the beginning of the week and the protesters and the newsmen being kicked at the end of the week, how that was evidence that Mr. Gorbachev is not in complete control of the KGB. I just don't have the evidence on that either way. What we are seeing clearly, and your summation at the beginning of this broadcast summed it up very well, we are seeing a snapshot in the history of the development of openness in the Soviet Union. This is the tale of two countries. Both of these images of the Soviet Union are genuine and true. And I think whether or not Mr. Gorbachev ordered the crackdown on the protests this week, whether or not it was ordered at some level lower than that, almost misses the point. There is genuine democratization going on in the Soviet Union. I think we should all be impressed. At the same time, we should be impressed with the fact that this is a process. That he can't legislate it. No one can legislate it here overnight. And it is a process that will be glacial.
Okay, Wyatt, you were at the demonstration. I understand that our CBS crew was detained. Can you tell us exactly what happened? Were newsmen really hurt? Were the demonstrators, some of them women, most of them women actually, really hurt? What happened?
I'm not really sure. I'm not a good judge of that. I think that one of the Jewish women was hurt. Suffered bruises. It seemed to be the intent of the thugs that were out there not to hurt us. In fact, our sound man related an incident to me in which one of the thugs reared back with his fist and then held off, with the obvious intent being that they were brutally and physically serious about us not taking pictures. But stopped short of actually inflicting physical harm. The kicks to the back and the kicks to the kidneys that our crew suffered were not serious enough to go to the hospital or anything like that. The intent was to stop us from taking pictures, again, not to put us in any physical danger.
Wyatt, do you have any qualms about being completely honest right now in your reporting? Do you feel any limitation on what you can say as you report back from the Soviet Union?
None. Absolutely none. If the Soviet, there's no censorship of our reports from here. If Soviet television, for example, is not completely, is not on board, if you will, with the report that we're about to put on the air, they have on occasion denied us the use of these very facilities that I'm using right now. So there's indirect censorship in that sense. But once I get to these facilities, I am under no pressure to say it their way.
Okay, thank you very much. Wyatt Andrews from Moscow. We will be back with a Soviet official in a moment.
Here, it's me alone against the course. But in the financial world, you need all the help you can get. You need the Paine-Webber Army behind you.
Even golf legends can use strong financial backup, especially when one happens to be a successful businessman as well. Paine-Webber is ready to roll, putting all its resources at your command. Capital management teams expert in corporate, government, or individual financial matters, determined to provide the most creative financial solutions possible. You deserve great financial backup because Paine-Webber believes whether you run a company or invest in one, the quality of life just might depend on the quality of your financial services.
Thank you, Paine-Webber. Now that's the kind of army you want behind you.
They here yet?
Plenty of time. It's only 7:45.
What's so interesting?
Those two down there.
Oh, that's Wilson and Bennett. A couple of hotshots from finance.
What are they carrying?
Oh, those are computers.
Computers? They're taking our computers home at night?
Not exactly. They're bringing their computers in.
You're kidding. What for?
Well, for one thing, that's how they put together these killer forecasts.
You mean we can't do this on our system?
Nope. Not like this.
Okay, 2 questions. What kind of computers are they using?
And?
And why don't we have them?
We go back to Moscow now to Georgi Arbatov, member of the Soviet Central Committee and a senior advisor to Mikhail Gorbachev on East-West relations. Mr. Arbatov, everyone in this country has been impressed with your policy of glasnost or openness, but we are now confused when we see television pictures of official plainclothesmen beating up peaceful demonstrators. How can you explain to us how these two incidents can happen in 1 week? Brutal crackdown and release of 140 dissidents. What does it mean?
Well, you have to put into proportion everything. A process is going on, and Mr. Andrews, I think, grasped it in a correct way. It is a real process of democratization, intended not at all to impress you. We don't care too much about this, though we care, of course, to some degree. It's what we need. It's our problems. We have to sort them out. And so it's regarded here. On the other side, you had, a very strange things which many people here accept as a provocation, just to make things more difficult. You know, Mr. Begun, because of whom all the demonstrations started, his case was in the process of, a reassessment. And he would have been free several days ago. Wouldn't it be for this demonstration? He's free now, I can tell you. Well, the resolution, yes, it's already done. I think it is correctly done.
Let's explain, if we can,
despite this provocation, we did it.
Mr. Arbatov, let's explain who Mr. Begun is. He is one of the Jewish dissidents who was in jail, one of the few who was not released.
I am not a specialist in this. I don't know much. Only one thing, I made a telephone call just now before it, and I got the news that his case was resolved. And what happened there, you know, it's really like provocation. The first thing, these are guesses about plainclothes men, were they plainclothes men or not. Maybe were, maybe not. Then you take this case, a demonstration where there were, the last demonstration, 17 demonstrators, 42 foreign correspondents, 6 people from the embassies. And look what you had in Nevada. You have arrested more than 400 people. It goes very well with the most democratic society. Nobody raises hell about it. Now here, something happened. Something happened, and I don't think these people behaved in a correct way. We have certain rulings and laws you have to apply for a right to demonstrate, etc. And there could be hooligans who attack them, I don't know. So I think but you see, I think this provocation, it really achieved the goal. We speak now about what? Not about process of democratization, which is close to millions and millions. We speak about this one lady who had bruises, and a couple of American newsmen who
that's the point. Why did you allow that to happen?
Beating.
Mr. Arbatov, that's the point. Exactly. Let me ask you a question. That's the point. We in the United States wonder why you allowed pictures of such a brutal attack on women to be broadcast when you were establishing so much goodwill through your openness policy and democratization, as you call it. Does this show that Mr. Gorbachev is not in control of the KGB? Explain to us how it could have happened.
Well, you know, it's again a part of this attempts just to interfere with the normal process of development in our country, to make such conclusions.
Will you explain it to us?
You had in Philadelphia a very bad case when you bombed a house, the police bombed a house, and it led to tremendous fire. You remember it. Can we out of it draw a conclusion that all your officials are terrorists and the president can do nothing with the terrorists and all your authorities cannot? Something's happened, and our Izvestia correspondent in Washington is harassed for a long time. Our TV correspondent in London was beaten up. His camera was destroyed because he wanted to film the strikers at Murdoch's press empire. There were no excuses even.
Will those people be disciplined? Did they do something they shouldn't have done? Were the people who beat up the American newsmen, will they be disciplined? Did they do something they should not have done?
You know, I don't know who these people were. I can imagine they could have been hooligans.
Wow.
Because this demonstration went on for one day after another. Yeah. Don't laugh, Lesley. I can assure you that in Moscow you can find several dozens of people. When they hear that something is happening somewhere, they will be there and try to interfere.
Mr. Arbatov, can we change the subject for a sec? Because we are very interested in glasnost in this country, and I think a lot of people who have been there have come back and said they are impressed with the process. And let me ask you a question before I invite...
Speak slowly. I hear very bad.
I will speak slowly. Can you tell us exactly what the new emigration policy is? Will Jewish refuseniks now be allowed to emigrate to Israel or anywhere else, and how many will you allow to do that?
Well, you know, it is, again, an individual case. It is not a mass action when we kick out a certain number of people. The individual cases are being resolved, and they will be resolved. And this is part of the policy, and there are quite a number of cases which were resolved lately. And well, the whole process, you know, there are great changes here in internal policy which cover all the field of economic policy, social policy, what we call glasnost, and it has become already an international world, democratization of the country, etc. And I would prefer not to interfere with it and not to make such provocation. I, by the way, would recommend you to read the last edition from 9th of February of Time magazine and an article by Yevtushenko, who just remembers how late Senator Robert Kennedy told him that, you remember, maybe in 60s we had a political process of Sinyavsky and Daniel. Under pen names, they published in the West some articles which were regarded slanderous here, and they were put to trial. So Senator Kennedy told to Yevtushenko how it happened. He said that it means American secret police, has given it to the Soviet secret police. The real names of Sinyavsky and Daniel. And he says here in the magazine that he cannot yet tell the whole story. And why they did it? Just because they wanted to focus the attention of the public on this fabricated case.
Okay, Mr. Arbatov, we have two members of Congress who would like to join us in this discussion. Joining us from Indianapolis is Senator Richard Lugar, a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and here in Washington, Representative Dante Fascell, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman Fascell, let me ask you your impressions of the openness that we are observing in the Soviet Union, including the attack that took place on the demonstrators, and ask how you think this will affect U.S.-Soviet relations, if it will at all.
Well, I think our approach is cautious optimism. The General Secretary has certainly gone beyond rhetoric, and he deserves a great deal of credit for doing what he's done. But again, as Mr. Arbatov says, we've got to put it in perspective. And as Wyatt said, we saw both faces of the Soviet Union in the same week, and that's not going to go away. This is an evolving matter, and I agree with that, and I think it's going to take some time before we can really decide what is happening.
All right. Senator Lugar in Indianapolis. What are your impressions of what's going on? How do you think it's going to affect U.S.-Soviet relations?
Leslie, I would make 2 points. I think the Soviets have decided that democracy works and that economic progress is unlikely without democracy. The problem is how to open the door just a crack without it blowing open, and it appears to me the Soviets are doing just that. They're opening a crack. They have very heavy controls to make sure it doesn't get away from them, but the admission that they've got to go the democratic route is significant, even if merely an internal thing at present.
All right, gentlemen, why don't we take a short break, and we will all come back, Mr. Arbatov in Moscow, Senator Lugar, and Congressman Fascell, when we return.
Satellites need maintenance and refueling, so McDonnell Douglas is helping NASA plan a space station that will be an ideal satellite service center. Communities asked for peace and quiet, so we developed a tail rotor that cuts our helicopter's noise in half. Aerospace plane designers need a low-cost way to test ideas. Our simulators evaluate flight systems before they're built. We are creating breakthroughs in aviation, space, and information systems. We're McDonnell Douglas.
I'm Jimmy Connors. And it's about time you met my partner, my financial side.
All successful people and companies have a financial side.
Let's go, partner.
But to really be a winning team, you might need some help.
We need some help.
You need Payne Weber behind you for financial expertise, sound advice. We believe the quality of life just might depend on the quality of your financial services.
Thank you, Payne Weber. You're awfully stiff. You've got to loosen up a little bit.
Continuing our discussion with Congressman Fascell, Senator Lugar, and Georgi Arbatov. Congressman Fascell, we've been talking about how openness in the Soviet Union might affect U.S. relations, but let me ask you about how you think President Reagan's policy on the ABM treaty, trying to reinterpret it, have a broader approach to it, might affect arms control, and what your views of the president's policy.
Well, I'm not for a unilateral broadening of the interpretation of the ABM treaty, along with an early decision with regard to deployment of SDI. I think that's a mistake. I think a proper position is one we've already taken, which is that two countries have appointed a task force to at least discuss the problem. I just don't want to see us get so far out in front that we force the Soviets into some retaliatory position.
Well, what about SDI? Do you think it's something that we should attempt to continue? Should we try to readjust the ABM treaty in some way so that we can go forward with that program?
Well, I've certainly supported research, and the majority of the Congress and both parties have supported research. The problem starts with the reinterpretation of the ABM treaty, which leads to testing and development that goes beyond the normal interpretation or the interpretation that we've had of the ABM treaty up till now, and coupled with the decision for early deployment of a SDI system.
Well, let me ask Senator Lugar, can we go forward with SDI if we don't in some way change the ABM treaty? And if that's true, why not just withdraw from the treaty if we want to go forward with SDI?
Well, I'm certain that we need to develop the SDI, and eventually that would require, it seems to me, some reinterpretation of the ABM treaty. I think the debating on that issue of the first negotiations leads to ambiguous results. We ought to have consultation with Congress and with our allies, and obviously visit with the Soviets about this. But we need to proceed with the SDI. I think the Soviets will proceed with theirs, and we're going to enter into a new era beyond the balance of terror by getting into defensive weapons. And I think that requires reinterpretation of the ABM treaty.
Well, why not just withdraw then?
Well, because we're attempting to negotiate with the Soviets at several different levels. We're attempting to observe treaty obligations, and I think we're being faithful in that regard. We're simply just reviewing the negotiating record back in 1972 and elsewhere, in which it was the Soviets who apparently wanted a broader interpretation at that point, while we wanted a narrower one. The things seem to have changed a bit at this point, and I think a full consultation with everybody may result at least in a satisfying arrangement.
All right, let's go back to Moscow and bring Mr. Arbatov in. Apparently, Mr. Gorbachev is going to be giving a major speech tomorrow on Moscow television, Mr. Arbatov. Western observers say since it will be televised, it will be a major speech with some new initiatives. Can you give us a little preview?
Well, you know, I can hardly see you, listen to you, hear you. So I have to make my guess about what you asked me. You asked me about tomorrow Gorbachev's speech, as I understand.
Yes.
He will have a speech tomorrow.
What will he say? Will he have any new proposals, any new arms control proposals that you can tell us about?
You have to wait till tomorrow. I don't think we should introduce new proposals. You have not answered to our latest proposals, and the ball is in American garden. As to interpretation, you know, I'm astonished that people in your country use such euphemism. You want to tear the treaty, to break it. And you use the word interpretation. As to what Senator Lugar has said, it is not true. There is a forum on security and disarmament in Moscow at this moment. Many Americans take part, including some who negotiated the ABM treaty. It was documentary proven that this interpretation is the historic one, and the Russians didn't interpret it in a different way. It is proven fact, and these are again some fantasies which are being circulated there. I wanted also to answer, to comment one of the comments of Senator Lugar, who spoke about open society being in the United States as I heard it, and closed society being here. I think during the Iran Gate discussion, it is not very persuasive that you are such an open society.
All right, Senator Lugar, can you respond particularly on the broadening of the ABM treaty? Because I think that's going to be a major issue between our two countries.
Well, it is a major issue, and at the Reykjavik summit, we discussed SDI, obviously, and this entire situation. This appears to me that our position in the United States is to try to encourage Soviet friends to think in terms of defensive weaponry as opposed to preoccupation with offensive weaponry. And that's going to require some development and testing of our defensive mechanisms. I think the Soviets will require that too. I do not see this as a block, but it seems to me clearly we're headed eventually toward testing. We ought to do so with eyes wide open and with full consultation. But I think the ABM treaty gives us that opportunity. At least that's the assertion that we ought to make.
All right, let me explain to our viewers, if I can, that our satellite to Moscow has gone down. It was not something that the Soviet Union did. Apparently, there was some mix-up on the times that we asked for this satellite. So Mr. Arbatov is no longer with us. So let me turn to Congressman Fascell. It is too bad. and ask you, if we as a country and has Congress decided that we do want to go forward with SDI, and if that doesn't, in fact, mean that we are going to have to either negotiate a change in the ABM treaty or withdraw from it. I mean, isn't that simple logic?
Well, certainly if we go ahead with testing the development that flies into the face of the former interpretation of the ABM treaty, we have a problem as to whether or not we're in it or out of it. The debate still goes on as to what the interpretation is. So, you know, and then when you couple that with the decision, and frankly, I don't know why the decision was made to state that we're going to compress the time for deployment at a time when we can't begin to deploy. I don't know why we're saying now we're going to step up the time for deployment when deployment will be sometime after this administration, and we have no idea what the deployment's about or what kind of system it'll be.
Senator, why are we engaged in this problem right now? Why can't we wait 2-3 years before we try to broaden the treaty?
Well, we may. I don't think that there is any necessary compression here. Clearly, there are persons within the administration who believe that we ought to have testing and deployment sooner rather than later, and perhaps to ensure that the SDI continues. Maybe there is fear that there is not sufficient bipartisan cooperation to have sustaining power. I would hope that we would work to make sure there is that kind of bipartisan cooperation, because we need the SDI, and perhaps we need to negotiate among ourselves a little bit more to make certain we've got that kind of consensus.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Lugar. Congressman Fascell. Our cartoon this week is from Pat Oliphant of Universal Press Syndicate. President Reagan seeks out his predecessor. What is the answer, he asks. I'm Lesley Stahl. Have a good week.
This portion of Face the Nation was sponsored by the financial professionals at Payne Weber and by Apple Computer, personal computers that give you the power to be your best.
Miles of Hot Wheels on the hottest track. Feel the speed. The Daytona 500. Today on CBS Sports.
This is CBS.
It's their birthday, but the savings are for you during Big Sur Waterbed's President's Day celebration. Now through Monday at 9 p.m., you'll find star-spangled savings on our great selection of quality waterbeds, waterbed bedding, accessories, and solid wood bedroom furniture. This is the weekend to buy a waterbed. But honestly, the President's Day celebration ends Monday at 9 p.m. at Big Sur Waterbeds, America's largest, 3715 Merle Hay Road at Douglas in Des Moines.
This week on Midday, we'll help the oldest black church in the state celebrate a birthday. Find out how Lynette Woodard feels about being a pace-setting Harlem Globetrotter. And speaking of basketball, I'll share my recent reunion with Drake's famous 1968-69 team that went to the Final Four of the NCAA tournament. We'll introduce the new lottery game and have features on Iowa Families Together weekend.